everyone, and welcome to yet another game of Grand Prix Rome, MSEM's very first 44-player GP. For this game, we have GynoidPoet playing against TikiShades. GynoidPoet is on Red Black Burn. TikiShades is playing Grixis Dragons, which is centered around the Thu'um mechanic. So Thu'um is a mechanic that is effectively affinity for dragons and dragons in your graveyard. And it can also go on non-creatures, and it makes those things into dragons as well, which is really neat. GynoidPoet is on Blue-Red Burn, which is interesting and different from the Red-Black Burn that I think most people are on this GP. It's a little bit more of the traditional list that we've seen, with a added spice of Arcane Duelist. So Arcane Duelist is very similar to a card that just got banned in Legacy, Dreadhorde Arcanist, where it's a 2 CMC creature that whenever it attacks, it gives instant sorceries, flashback. And while this doesn't cheat on mana in the same way that Dreadhorde Arcanist does, it has 2 power, which is kind of exciting. But it looks like Tiki's going to be starting off with an Oracle's Vision to hopefully mill over some dragons, and maybe set up for a turn 2 Dweller-Maid Dova. Getting Dweller-Maid Dova down quickly is really important in this matchup because of how it stonewalls ground-based creatures like Suitor of the Sea or Arcane Duelist. I think the ideal curve here for GynoidPoet is going to be something like Land, Suitor, Duelist, Scorch, which represents a lot of damage very quickly, to be fair. But mills over Suitor of the Sea and a Land and an Oil Driller, which none of that's super relevant. GynoidPoet's deck doesn't have a lot of graveyard stuff. Milling over Beneath the Zendina is not something that matters in this game 1, but it's kind of interesting in general. This card is a tech to hedge against a lot of the common graveyard hate, especially if you mill over 2 copies. It also just has some utility, just casting it to recur Dweller-Maid Dovas. Two dragons are in the graveyard now, which means this Dweller-Maid Dova costs 2 mana. So a Murmuring Falls will cast it next turn, which, this is a huge difference in terms of being on the play. If TikiShades was on the draw, they'd be untapping into like 17 life at least, and possibly less. Drawing an Oil Driller here is nice. Dweller-Maid Dova has to trade with this, and if it doesn't, Oil Driller can sometimes end up recurring some kind of powerful things. Technically, it is possible for it to recur the other Oil Driller, which is sweet. So Tiki could get greedy here and attempt to Oracle's Vision and hit, 2 more, or 1 or 2 more Thu'um creatures. I haven't done the math. I don't think that is the correct move, but I think keeping that velocity going is an understandable Siren Song to listen to. I think in Tiki's spot, I would probably take the 1 damage from Murmuring Falls and just play out the Dweller-Maid Dova. And then once I had a board presence established, then you can look to start milling more with Oracle's Vision, trying to set up Stormwing Dova, especially because Dweller-Maid Dova, Thu'um is also affinity for dragons in play. So this means that all 3 of these Stormwing Dovas now are down to CMC 3. Marina could also spew off 2 Scorches to kill Dweller-Maid Dova. I think that's a choice I would struggle to make, but it might be the right one. It's also possible you should trade. I don't think it's reasonable to trade Suitor of the Sea and a Scorch for it, because then you can't establish any board presence. You could also just sit back here, like resting on your Suitor of the Sea, and just start chucking bolts. GynoidPoet is up to 9 points of burn in hand, which puts Tiki at 8. When you start adding the Suitor of the Sea pings here, you can quickly add up. MSEM GPs are run at Comp REL, but thankfully Comp REL does have the takes backsies clause, where if you make a minor mistake like playing the wrong card, and then before any information is gained, you immediately realize your decision and choose to undo it, that's a-okay. These sorts of things are also why you'll sometimes see games slow down to handle judge calls, however. But it's just, we're a big fan of playing games by the rules and moving things forward in that way. Arcane Duelist here on 2 is smart. It really sets GynoidPoet up to, cast a lot of burn spells next turn. So we could see a Scorch, kill the Dweller-Maid Dova, swing for 4 plus another Scorch. Given adding the Suitor of the Sea take to that as well, kills Tiki very quickly. Stormwing Dova is actually kind of a huge liability versus burn decks, which is kind of interesting. I don't think I've seen the Thu'um versus burn matchup before, but the fact that this card is a two-sided Bedlam Reveler is really, like, your burn opponent will be so much better at emptying their hand than you, and giving your opponent 3 cards for free has some major risks associated with it. Players are quickly discussing, like, trying to figure out what's going on. In general, I feel like the Thu'um deck really preys on mid-range decks and control decks, primarily, um, and has a lot of issues versus aggro, at least from what I've seen of it. Um, but I'll be curious to see how the rest of this game plays out, and this match in general. Drawing Author Basic there is actually surprisingly great, since it turns off the damage in this Murmuring Falls and also allows Tiki to cast Oracle's Vision, uh, and maybe curve Oracle's Vision into Stormwing Dova. Again, a little bit unfortunate to have to discard the other two, but, it is what it is. It's also a little bit scary to be milling your opponent when they have an Arcane Duelist out, um, because you can potentially mill them into gas. But no gas was hit, and also no gas was milled. Or rather, no dragons were milled. This Draconic Divulging is now a 1-mana spell, and it's a very powerful 1-mana spell at that. But this sort of tire spinning is a thing that I think favors GynoidPoet by a fairly large margin. I think I'd be tempted here to discard Stormwing Nova to continue to juice up your Doom synergies, since it acts kind of as a mini ritual going forward. And yeah, Tiki agrees with me. Um, One thing that's interesting is if the Doom count gets up to 5, you can actually cast 2 Stormwing Dovas um, next turn. Yeah, I think that's actually going to be the case, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeesh. Okay, so there's going to be another free Dwemer Made Dova played, and if Tiki survives the untap, which seems like what's going to happen, we can see 2 Stormwing Dovas come down. I feel like GynoidPoet's in a bad spot here, although Swing here I think does favor GynoidPoet. I excuse me, having 2 blockers back really insulates you from Arcane Duelist doing some really stupid things. Yeah, drawing out Scourge also super helps. Wow, okay. I think if GynoidPoet uses her resource correctly, this game is actually potentially hers to win. I think we'll see a doubles. So there's a couple different ways to slice this. I think double scorching the Dwemer Made Dova is the best move. Um, and then you get in for 8 to 4, 5, 6, 7. So put your opponent down to 9, they get on to 8 from the Suitor of the Seas trigger, and then you just hopefully finish them off the next turn. Very exciting. I'm thinking about the kind of different things that could go down here. The other thing that you could do is you could just cast 9 points of burn at face and then just sit back, I guess, is an option. Or do 3 points of burn at the Dwemer Made Dova, 3 points of burn at face, let the Dwemer Made Dova trade with whatever it chooses to. And then I guess that nets you some extra damage, but I think that's worse in the long run. In general, giving your opponent choices is generally bad. There's also an interesting philosophical decision with this Arcane Duelist, which is, should you cast the Scorch from Graveyard, or should you cast the Scorch from Hand? Scorch from Hand is marginally better in the face of Stormwing Dovas, although obviously you don't know whether or not TikiShades, Tiki just taking 9, okay, is going to be casting it. Okay, so Tiki's just jumping a little bit ahead. Got it. So I was going to say, there is some value to casting Scorch from Hand, which is it plays around Stormwing Dova, but you don't want to leave value on the table with that Arcane Duelist trigger. It's only card advantage if you're casting cards out of your graveyard, especially because it could get killed. And also, I think there's a lot of value in burn with your opponent not knowing whether or not they're dead on the untap. Because right now, if Tiki's looking at this board state, it's like, well, I'm probably going to take maybe 5 damage, or, well, on board I'll probably take like 3 damage. But if you have any burn spell in hand, that immediately becomes lethal. So, keeping that lethal secret is good. Ooh, I don't like playing out the mountain. Playing out the mountain means you can't double Stormwing Dova this turn, and I think just getting all of the bodies onto the battlefield is the correct move, especially while your opponent's tapped out and can't potentially take advantage of the cards being drawn and discarded. Tiki might also be setting up to do like a cast Storming Dova in your draw step to try to deny you some extra cards, but I think that's really risky. It's also possible we're going to see like casting this and hoping to draw into a card that costs red mana, but I don't think that's particularly I don't think that's a particularly good approach since a lot of the red cards in Tiki's deck are double red. Well, did draw the Dovazire, so was rewarded for their decision. I think so. Swinging with Doemre Dova now, I think, is the correct move because it puts your opponent on a 2-turn clock. I think holding back is dangerous. But so goes to 8. I think Tiki should Dova's Ire the Arcane Duelist before it gets the chance to attack. Would be my guess. And in that circumstance, I'm not sure how GynoidPoet wins from here. Interesting. Okay. So is not going to kill the Arcane Duelist, but unfortunately, Gynoid bricks on the land, which is unfortunate, or bricks on the draw, which is unfortunate. So this attack can do at most 5 damage, and actually will realistically do less in the face of Dova's Ire. And with no additional points of burn in hand, there's no out to the 8 power flying on board. But very close game 1. It's possible we'll see them continue to play it out a bit, but I feel fairly confident saying this game is done. And I'm definitely excited to see what postboard has to offer. Pause to give Tiki the chance to Dovazire. I think if you're not going to Dovazire, there was 0 point in holding up this mana. But I guess you also like I don't think we're gonna see no Dovazire happening. What was the miss trigger? Oh, I think miss trigger is just being used to describe missed the window to Dovazire, I think. But I mean, I guess from where Tiki is sitting, they might be feeling very dead, in fact, because 3 points of burn from graveyard. Your burn opponent has 4 cards in hand. It's gonna be a little sketch and scary. Yeah, that's not what a trigger means. But yeah, I think Tiki played this match relatively well, and I think their hand lined up extraordinarily well into this matchup. I think like throughout this game there haven't been a lot of moments where I was like, clearly this is the misplay, and this is how I would have done it better. So anytime that's not happening, I think that's generally a good sign. I do feel like GynoidPoet is kind of rearranging deck shares on the Titanic at this point, given the well, I guess you can buy yourself a turn by scorching the Stormwing Dova from here. And then you only are down to 3 next turn, and you have an extra turn to draw, like a Plasma Addict, I guess. But I don't know what the winning line looks from this scenario. Maybe it involves drawing into a. Actually, let's check. Yeah. So I am wrong. There is a winning line, and it is good that GynoidPoet isn't scooping. So, big props to her for seeing this, and I'm glad to keep this in mind in the future. So, on your next draw step, you could draw Mindstorm's Eye. Deal 3 damage to Tiki. You could draw into 2 burn spells and get lethal. You could also, after Tiki swings, draw an Oil Driller. It recurs burn spells. You do the thing. Yeah, so it is correct to keep playing this out. It is a good decision to answer the board in play. I was just fixated on can kill your opponent. If you can't, this game is over. Which, while that's sometimes how burn works, it isn't always how burn works. And draws another land off that, which is a little bit unfortunate. Seeing if this Oracle's Vision hits anything exciting for Arcane Duelist is cool. Probably can't, because, there's already Lava Spikes in the graveyard. And I mean, if you're in TikiShades spot, I think now you don't want to attack. This actually, yes, you put your opponent dead in the following turn, but your opponent now can swing. I mean, if your opponent draws any burn spell, you die. And that's a little bit scary. Whereas if you kept your creature back, you would survive at 2 HP. Yeah, and TikiShades is correct. Letting the Arcane Duelist attack was game deciding. Unfortunately, it actually looks like it won't end up mattering, because the Arcane Duelist plus Scorch in graveyard is only 5 points of damage, and Tiki's going to survive at 2 health after the Suitor of the Sea tick. If Dodger was co-casting, he would have pointed out that Gynoid could have fetched away with the Magmatic Torrent to technically reduce the chances of drawing a land. Deck thinning is not statistically relevant in most cases, but it is worth mentioning here, just because it's free extra percentage points. But yeah, now we're just rearranging deck chairs. Unless, are there utility lands in this deck I'm forgetting? No, there are not. Okay, just double checking. Yeah, swinging 4 in the air. Definitely a close and exciting game. I am looking forward to seeing what the I'm looking forward to seeing what the post-board games look like, because I think both of these decks get slightly more tools after that. In particular, I think picking up Smoldering Pages is really tempting versus the Dormermaid Dovas. That might be hyper-focusing on some things, and Tiki, on the other hand, doesn't really get that much. Like, Memento Mori or Violent Collapses are fine, but actually both players are fairly linear decks. So we're probably not going to see much in the way of sideboarding, but both do technically have sideboard tools to bring in. We could see Civilization's cost come in, since Tiki's deck is very non-basic heavy. Let's go ahead and switch Obscenes really quickly to the deck list. So, Civilization's cost in Gynoid's deck is probably the most tempting thing. If it gets milled over, that feels great. It can pretty regularly deal your opponent 3 to 4 damage, and you can cast it twice, so that's a lot of reach. Rage of the Ravaged is fine, but I probably wouldn't bring it in. Smoldering Page is good against exactly Dwarmade Dova, but it's great there. Brazen Sacrilege isn't really what this matchup is about. This matchup isn't really about grinding your opponent out. GynoidPoet got a little bit flooded there. I think that's not the usual case, though. I'd probably look to cut the Oil Drillers because it gets blocked by everything, and doesn't really trade favorably. Like, I think you want to be more of a Lava Spike-centric deck rather than a creature-centric deck. To the extent that I might consider cutting Plasmatics, but that's probably madness. On Tiki's end, Profane Emissary is great. You can't really cut any of your creatures that are how you win this game. I probably would cut the Forgotten Knowledges, though, since I don't think that's the axis that this game is going to be thought on. It's not about number of cards. Meanwhile, and since there's no graveyard hate coming in, maybe you also cut Beneath the Zendinas. I think I'm kind of tempted in the idea of bringing in Violent Collapse or Memento Mori. Violent Collapse kills all Gynoid's creatures, and as we discussed, Gynoid's Gynoid's current game plan is very much creature-centric. Like, if you compare this list to some of the other, like the Red-Black Burn decks, this deck runs so many more creatures. But yeah, that would be kind of what I would expect to see, is more interaction and less card advantage from Tiki, and fewer creatures and more burn spells from Gynoid. So let's go ahead and switch back to the Cockatrice window. So both of our players Tiki is finishing sideboarding. It looks like Gynoid keeps going back and forth about whether she likes her sideboard configuration or not. In general, I'm a big believer of you should have your ins and outs prepared before the game you play. Obviously, this is just a match for, it's for fun, so I'm certainly not admonishing either player here. But I definitely put a fair bit of thought in advance into how I want to sideboard in any given matchup, especially because, matchups are posted in advance. But yeah, it's definitely, I definitely am interested in how many people are on kind of fairly linear decks this GP. I think it's probably slightly correlated with the fact that we have a lot of newer players, and if you're new to a format, one of the best things you can do is just be on a linear deck, because interactive decks require a lot more format knowledge in terms of, what do I counter? When do I counter it? Whereas linear decks, there's no such thing as wrong threat, there's just wrong answers, is the old adage. So something minor that I just noticed. TikiShades locked their sideboard. So, in Cockatrice, while you hit unlock sideboard to begin the sideboarding process, you don't click lock sideboard to lock in your choices. You actually click lock sideboard to reset. So, I'm a bit worried that Tiki made a bunch of sideboard changes and that just all got undone. But we'll see. I'm not sure what the fix there would be if that was the case. There's some discussion about the London Mulligan. As discussed, we saw Civ's cost come in, Plasmatic stayed in. Um, the initial hand was pretty mediocre, but this hand is very good. You can have a turn 2 Profane Emissary with lifelink, and especially because it has 4 toughness, I think you're in a great spot there. It is a turn 2 play, and you're on the draw versus burn. I think in this spot, I would probably bottom beneath the Zendina. Um, Stormwing, Stormwing Dova looks hard to cast, but you actually have these 2 Polyp Pools, so it's only a 5 draw. I don't know. I guess it's actually Tiki's decision is also fairly reasonable because beneath the Zendina can find more threats. Um, Marina's GynoidPoet's hand is quite good in terms of double scorch, turn 1 threat, and if you draw any lands, it becomes just amazing with this Plasmatic. I'm a little worried about bricking happening here, but I'm not sure if I would be worried enough to mulligan to 5. I think this is just a good 6-card hand. Um, this Winged Descent is pretty exciting from Tiki's perspective because that's a turn 3 kill spell where you go turn 2 Polyp Pools, turn 3 Polyp Pools, 2 mana, kill your creature. Given this, so I think based on this Banished Companion draw, I think you're definitely incentivized to cast it and just get in the red zone. Unfortunately, this is also not going to pan out great versus the lifelinking 4/4 that's about to come down. I don't think Tiki actually has 1 mana kill spells in this spot, but good practice just check. So yeah, 4 damage should put both players down to 15, and then the tick damage from Suitor will put Tiki down to 14. But then the Scorches aren't actually going to get there. We might see if there's a land draw, I think Gynoid is still very much in this because you can swing out with both creatures. Tiki blocks, you Scorch, you then Scorch Face, and yeah, Tiki gained a lot of life in that process, but you still have pressure on board. I think if Gynoid bricks on a land for another turn, this game is probably over. But I'm not sure. I am someone who, especially when I am, casting and viewing it from up here, I definitely think things are over sooner than they actually are. And it is always a player's right to play it out regardless. Yeah, that is not the card you want to draw in this board state. I guess you just start hurling lava spikes upstairs and hope that your creatures force Tiki to stay back. I think the Winged Descent is going to complicate that a lot. I definitely think attacking here is very wrong. I think if you trade, a creature and a card and like 5 damage for Tiki to survive, then just go back up to 15 or whatever, I think that's a net mistake. So Tiki is stabilized at 15 life. I think in this spot I want to play out the Polyp Pools, take 1 damage from Murmuring Falls to kill the Banished Companion, and then on the following turn you can cast a Stormwing Dova. That's the line that we're about to see. Oh, I disagree with this. So Beneath the Zendina, yeah, it helps fuel up your Thu'um stuff, and it buys back the Profane Emissary, but it's slow. Like, you're not going to be able to play the Profane Emissary this turn. You're taking 1 damage to recur it, and then 1 damage the following turn to play it, and you're giving this entire window for your opponent to just force a bunch of other damage through. Like, this Banished Companion, if the Gynoidpoet draws any land, Tiki's down to 10 life, then down to 7 the following turn, without being able to lifelink back up because it's just a flying attacker. And then from there, you actually get into a spot where you can pretty easily get burned out. And that's the land. Okay, so I think in this spot it is correct to cast Plasma Addict, get him for 5, put Tiki to 10, and then the following turn you could get Tiki down to 1 life. Do you have lethal the following turn? Oh geez. That might have cost Tiki the game. Assuming Gynoid sees the line. So you go Plasmatic, you swing for 5, Tiki goes to 10. Tiki goes to 9 to play the Profane Emissary the following turn. And then you can swing Plasmatic, Scorch, Storm Surge. Scorch. Wow, can't talk anymore. So yeah, that this is, I mean, this is showcasing the power of burn, and also just how intricate these aggro mirrors are. There's just so many decisions to be made, and it's really easy to do the wrong ones. So in that case, I feel like Tiki is kind of priced into doing this plan though. Like if you recur the Profane Emissary, you kind of have to play it now. If you just wing it to send the Plasmatic, like then like I'm trying to think of how that works. So you Wayfarer Shrine for a swamp, you kill the Plasmatic, you take 2, you're at 8, so you go down to 6, and then you die to double Scorch. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to escape the game state that Tiki has found themselves in. I guess I guess Wayfarer Shrine means you can do both. So you can you can take another damage down to 7 life to also be able to wing and Descent the Plasmatic. Then you go to 1 off of the burn spells, and you gain 4 up to 5. Then take another. Yeah, I think it still doesn't work out, but it's harder for Tiki to know that it won't work out. So this game isn't over. There's still decisions to be made. There's still plenty of opportunities for either player to misplay. Um, but it definitely is coming down to the wire. Hmm. What is the most powerful thing that that doesn't super matter in the sports state? But it's not bad. I definitely think you just attempt to swing in with a plasmatic. Um, I think there's no world in which you attack with a Spanish companion. Oh! I totally forgot you could wing a descent off the Polyp Pools because Polyp Pools does actually tap for mana when Profane Emissary is in play. Oh, that's a good heads up play. That's something I would have missed. Which means that burning out Tiki is a lot more difficult to do from this spot because you're not getting that 1 extra damage off the Wayfarer Shrine. Although if you weren't going to crack the Wayfarer Shrine this turn, you probably should have played out the Shardstone Rift, given that you want to get that down without paying life. But I suppose that's beside the point. I think from here, you're just gonna, yeah. Are we gonna see an Arcane Duelist or Storm Surge plus Scorch? It looks like Storm Surge plus Scorch. Killing the Profane Emissary or going face, I guess, is also a question. So this is giving up, 6 damage to prevent 4 to 8 points of life gain. If it's on the 4 side, it's not worth it. If it's on the 8 side, it is worth it. But I think if you're, I guess this is the right way to sequence it, because in the off chance your opponent doesn't have interaction, you want to save all the burn spells for lethal. Um, but this does technically mean you're leaving 2 damage on the table with Banished Companion not attacking. Crumbly Precipice is not the ideal draw there, but I don't think it's going to matter because we're just going to see this Stormwing Dova come down for, I think, 2 mana? Have we milled over? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so yeah, this is currently a 2-drop. So playing out the land can take 1 damage to play this Stormwing. Although, again, gassing your burn opponent up never feels good. So we might see like an attempt to do it on draw step to deny your opponent that 1 extra card. Oh geez. Dub Civ's cost means that this Stormwing Dova cannot come down without it being lethal. Because if both of these Civ's costs get discarded, Gynoid can cast them both from graveyard for 2 mana and deal 8 damage. So we are going to see this come down, and this is actually effectively a ritual for your opponent, which you can't know, and this is a forced play, like you can't just sit here, but it sucks that this is how it works out. So it does look like we're going to be getting a game 3 here. So that's going to be exciting. Right? I'm doing math right? Yeah, that's it. 8 damage from graveyard. So, Banished Companion is blocked. It doesn't matter. You definitely want to cash in the Civ's cost, though, before your opponent gets the chance to untap and potentially fetch away this Shardstone Rift or draw counter magic or what have you. That whelp worries me. Yeah, okay. Okay, so it is a good whelp. And this game ends with a blast that can bring us directly to the 3rd game in this series. And I think a lot of these choices stem from the early decision to recur I mean, I'm not sure. I harped a lot on the decision to recur the Profane Emissary, and I'm still not convinced that was the right move, but I don't feel like I have a great sense of how this game would have played out without that detail, especially given that GynoidPoet stumbled on land slightly. So the slightly clunkier route that gains you more life if the game goes long is correct if your burn opponent looks like they're stumbling and the game is going to go long. Um, I just also kind of feel like the circumstances where that happens, you're so drastically favored that you should be playing for the other circumstances. But one of the things that makes Magic such an amazing game is how often you can just get stuck in those endless pits of, was this the right line or would this have been the right line? Um, there's a lot of room for decision making and discussion about that decision making. And TikiShades appears to have found out the issue with locking your sideboard. So hopefully they didn't draw any cards that they cited out or what have you last game. Um, but in terms of like sideboarding, we've already discussed it. I don't think it changes too much if you're on the player of the draw for either player. I think if I'm on the draw as burn, I'm slightly more interested in burns like lava spikes over creatures because of Profane Emissary and One Made Dova coming down and blocking off creatures. Um, but I'm not sure about that. Again, I haven't practiced this matchup. I don't play either of these decks basically ever. Um, MSEM has a lot of depth to it, and while I've explored a fairly sizable chunk of it, uh, there's so much that I haven't, which is one of the things that keeps it endlessly entertaining for me. Alright, so this is really interesting opening hand from Tiki. This has the ability to turn 1 Oracle's Vision to set up a probably turn 4-ish Stormwing Dova, and it has Profane Emissary, but no Polyp Pools to go along with it. And while Profane Emissary can 2-drop its own Polyp Pools, it can also get burned out if you do that. So we are going to see the hand kept. It's possibly just like basically on the back of that. It's possibly just on the back of the Oracle's Vision. And milling over two Thu'um cards is a great start. Again, that means this is now a 5-drop. So is this. But on the other hand, GynoidPoet's hand is just all burn spells. Just all gas. Mana is going to be the bottleneck here. I think we're going to see a Suitor of the Seas on 1, and then I think we're going to see a Scorch on the Profane Emissary turn 2, which is kind of a huge tempo blowout. You spend 2 mana to play your creature that immediately gets answered by a 1-mana burn spell, and you only gain, the virtual 3 off it rather than the, 8 or whatever that you were hoping to gain. That hurts. That hurts a lot. Excuse me. Whoa. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was deeply confused about that decision making. I think we'll see a Flooded Morass. It does put this Diving Dova fairly far out of castability, but I think that's just, acceptable casualties. So the nut draw here for a Gynoid is any red source. I think your hand definitely fishes a turn 4. It might goldfish turn 3 if you hit a red source. Yep. Okay, so Scorch the Emissary. Swing Bolt, that's 5. Your opponent's at 14. They take damage to 13. On your turn 3, since your opponent's not going to be able to impact the board, you can deal them another 9 plus 2. They're down to 3. Yeah, it's not quite a turn 3 goldfish, but it's damn near close. This hand is just such high octane, and I don't think that Tiki should have mulliganed or whatnot. But I think this is just a slightly unfortunate spot to be in. And a very good hand from Gynoid. Drawing another land is really not where you want to be. So I think you have to play out a tapped land. That way you don't take damage from it. You're only at 2 Thu'um spells in graveyard, so again, these are 5 drops. So I think you need to play land, pass, and hope you draw some action the following turn, because you don't get turns after that. I think Tiki might actually be deterministically dead from the information we have, but I'm very cautious in terms of saying that because of how many times I've been super wrong about that over the course of the past 2 games. So I should probably get out of the habit of suggesting that is something that people are ever. Doesn't draw another land, but does draw more face burn. So can chuck another 6 at Tiki, down to 5, takes 1 off of the Suitor of the Seas tick, and then you untap with another 3 points of burn, plus another 2 points of swing, plus the 1 point of tick damage, or, if your opponent wheels, like, we're seeing the same thing happen, where Civ's cost is uniquely amazing against Stormwing Dova, where Stormwing Dova can come down and just immediately make your opponent mana for those Civ's costs. Dwemer Dova is not a bad draw here. It doesn't look like it'll matter because of the Besought Charm plus Suitor of Sea's tick. So I guess the only thing that would have been best here is Winged Descent or Dovazire. But getting to play Dwemer Dova and setting up for the turn 4 Stormwing Dova is pretty great. Or, sorry, turn 5 Stormwing Dova. Yeah, that didn't shave any turns off the clock. And if you're Gynoid, you're just untapping knowing that you have this. Don't even need to swing like you can if you want to. It'll end the game this turn rather than giving your opponent an upkeep. But your opponent doesn't have any instant speed life gain. So, there's no wrong way to finish this game off. And it looks like Blue-Red Burn has claimed an opponent. The two Red-Black Burn decks lost in basically identical matchups earlier this round. Spoilers if you haven't watched those episodes yet. But this Blue-Red, I think, both hit a better opponent for this matchup, and just drew very fortunately in this third game. Yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and hopefully we will be bringing you more exciting coverage of both round 1 and future rounds in Grand Prix Rome soon.